Hello friends, welcome to Ecoholics YouTube channel. My name is Avinash and in this video I'll be discussing with you economics current affairs for 21st October 2024. I have selected two very good articles from the Mint newspaper. First article gives you a historical arc of development of infrastructure in India, that what was the approach that was taken by government of India traditionally to develop infrastructure in India, and how we are continuing to use some of the older elements in a newer mechanism to develop the digital public infrastructure in India. So it's a very beautiful article. It's a kind of article that gives you an overall understanding of what is happening in our country. In that sense, you must read this article. It's a very beautiful article. And the second article, it speaks about what steps can be taken to protect India's domestic steel industry from the rising steel imports from countries such as China, Japan, South Korea, and Vietnam. Again, this is a very relevant article because this is an emerging problem, and we have to tackle this problem one way or the other. Both these questions or both these articles can find way in it. So let us start with the discussion. I hope I am clearly audible to all of you. If there is any questions, please feel free to ask. And this note will be available on the Ecoholics app. You can download the app. From there, you can go into the free study materials section and you can download this note. All right, let us start. Let us speak about the digital infrastructure. Okay, so let us understand the historical arc that I was speaking about. Okay, so earlier what used to happen was that British companies, they established the first railway system in India. As students of economics, probably you all are aware that this railway system that was established by the Britishers, whether it is the British company or by the British Raj, right? So this infrastructure was created to serve Britishers' interests, to serve their ambitions. So be it coverage, be it access, be it pricing, be it transportation rules and regulations, this entire network was created, designed, implemented, keeping in mind the interests of the Britishers. All right, this was the pre-independence era. Post-independence, government of India obviously realized the importance of this railway network as a public good. So government of India, they took up the creation of this network, the operations of this network, so as to encourage economic activity in our country, so as to help economic agents leverage this kind of a public network in their commerce, in their transactions, in their economic activities. And same was applicable to other common infrastructure. So whether it was roads or ports or later on national highways, all of these infrastructures have been created by enthusiastic and active participation of government of India to serve the economic agents in our country, to serve their interests, to give a boost to economic activity within our country, right? The idea over here is that why is it that government got involved in the creation of this infrastructure, whether it was road, port or railway network? Why is it that government participated so actively? Because the government realized that the scale of investment is huge, and the government realized that we have to create and run this network keeping in mind democratic principles. We have to make this network applicable for everybody, relevant for everybody, helpful for everybody. It has to be a public good, and the scale of investment is so large, so huge, that no private sector will be able to do it, and we don't want it to be a private good. Hence the government itself got involved in creation of a variety of infrastructure types in India since independence, right? Now this is the historical arc. Okay, now what is happening in the 21st century is equally fascinating, right? Because now what we are doing is that we are creating digital public infrastructure, and over here again you will see that government of India is an enthusiastic and an active and a positive contributor. Government of India is an enabler, and unlike in the past, we are not excluding the private sector. I hope you realize that when we gave public sector enterprises commanding heights of the economies, we were kind of excluding the private sector from those commanding heights of the economy. When we were spending on nationalization of coal mines and nationalization of banking, we were kind of excluding the private sector from the party. But now, when we are creating the digital public infrastructure, we are not at all excluding the private sector from the party. In fact, government of India is just starting the process, and the process is being taken ahead by the private sector in a very, very big way. in a very, very big way, right? So this change started with the creation of HTTP and SMTP. I'm not so much of a computers or an IT guy, so I will just let this be over here. The idea is that with the development of HTTP and SMTP, we got universal access to web and digital communication. All of us across the world, we got this, right? And probably from here we started understanding the transformative power of digitization. And understanding this transformative power, Government of India started building the foundational infrastructure in the digital domain, right? Why did Government of India started creating foundational infrastructure in the digital domain? Because we wanted inclusivity to be the hallmark of this infrastructure. We wanted this infrastructure to cut across society segments, to cut across geographical regions, to cut across classes and be available for everybody, which is where we started creating this DPI, right? And we have launched several initiatives on our way towards becoming a digital India. For instance, nationwide broadband access is something that we are working on. There is a standalone dedicated scheme for the same, nationwide broadband access. Apart from that, Aadhaar is now available to establish the identity of any and every citizen in the country. Apart from that, there is a unified payment interface UPI, which has revolutionized the way we do payments in India. The kind of data that is now available based on millions of UPI transactions which are being done on, let us say, a daily, weekly and a monthly basis is absolutely huge. Nooks and corners of the country के अंदर UPI घुस चुका है, right? And the best part over here is that UPI involved the participation from every member of the banking system in an interoperable manner. So each and every private bank was directly or indirectly somewhere or the other involved in the creation of UPI. Same goes with Aadhaar, that government created the mandate. Ultimately, the enrollment and everything else happened with the involvement of the private sector. And it is the private sector, the banking sector, the telecom sector, the insurance companies which are using Aadhaar in the biggest possible way, right? So you will see over here that government is playing the role of an enabler. Government is not at all playing the role of a monopoly player. Government is not at all edging out the private sector in any way whatsoever. So government is trying to create an ecosystem whereby the private sector can then come, invest and be a part of it, and not just one private sector or your monopoly private sectors or your Amazons of the world or Flipkarts of the world. We are wanting to involve everyone, right? So that is what we are trying to do over here, right? That we want innovators and we want entrepreneurs to build on this digital public infrastructure that we have created. Now this article has been written by the chairperson of ONDC, right? Like I mentioned to you that आधार की वजह से टेलीकॉम एंड बैंकिंग को बहुत बूस्ट मिला है, राइट? आधार एनपीसीआई की वजह से, यूपीआई की वजह से जो पूरी पेमेंट्स इंडस्ट्री, जो बैंकिंग इंडस्ट्री, उसको बहुत बड़ा बूस्ट मिला है. नाउ कमिंग to the fact that this article has been written by the chairperson of ONDC, let us spend some time, and this is a standalone question which can be asked in the examination to you about ONDC, about the potential of ONDC, about the challenges in front of ONDC, right? So in the field of commerce, so far as creating the digital public infrastructure is concerned, Government of India has created open network for digital commerce, right? Government of India is acting as a sponsor and endorser of a Section 8 company, right, which is essentially acting as a non-profit setup, right, which is creating and running this ONDC, right? Industry participation has been used in a very big way. This open protocol has been created, right, so that this network can be used by anybody and everybody to offer their goods and services across the length and breadth of the country, right? So we are not trying to restrict existing players such as Amazons of the world. We are not trying to harm their business models at all. Rather, we are trying to create an inclusive platform, right, whereby anybody and everybody can participate, right? So we want to expand the footprint of digital commerce from the single digit levels to penetration to population scale. So आज के दिन भी how many people are buying from digital commerce, how many people are selling through digital commerce, numbers are strong. But we want these numbers to be population scale numbers, and which is where this DPI comes into the place, right? So this will provide access to market, access to credit, access to skills, access to logistics, and it will be done in a democratic manner. It will be done keeping in mind the requirements of small and micro enterprises. So it is not as if that your digital payments can be accepted only by your malls. Digital payments can be accepted by my pan wala as well. It is not as if that Aadhaar is used by only large organizations. Every organization can use Aadhaar. Any organization can use it, right? So every product or service, right, which is catalogable, right, which can be sold online, will be sold online. It can be discovered online, it can be negotiated online, it can be contracted online. We can do the servicing of these orders online. We can do all of these things, right? So we want to mature this particular network. There are 1.4 billion consumers. These consumers will act as a common pool which will be available to every merchant, every service provider across the length and breadth of the country. So we'll be breaking silos, we'll be breaking clubs of privileges. That's what we'll be doing. And we'll be enabling multiple networks in commerce, logistics, mobility, health, agriculture, energy going ahead, right? So that's the beauty of this idea, right? The beauty is collaboration, that this is a very new form of public-private participation that is happening. This is not your tainted public-private participation of the first decade of the 21st century, where public-private participation meant that the private sector was basically taking the public sector for a ride. This is not that kind of participation where the costs are escalating and when gold plating of contracts or gold plating of projects is happening. This is not that kind of public-private participation. This is a new breed of public-private participation, which is enabling innovation, specialization, entrepreneurship. And government is not really getting into the business at all. Government is playing the true role of being an enabler, of being somebody who is helping these companies reach the kind of scale they can reach, right? So I want you to attempt this kind of a question. It's a very beautiful, very important question. I hope you are appreciating the same. That examine the role of India's DPI in enabling inclusive economic participation and fostering competition, and how does public-private collaboration contribute to this ecosystem. This is a very, very relevant article, guys. Please do the needful from your end as well, right? I have highlighted the importance of this article. I hope you will write something on it, read something more on it, develop your thought process on it, so that in the examination you are better prepared to face this thought, right? Moving ahead, next article is a fairly straightforward article. So what is happening? Let me explain what is happening first of all to you. So see, what is happening is that a lot of countries, China's, Japan's and South Korea's of the world, they have created massive production capacities. Massive production capacities. They have insufficient or inadequate domestic demand within their countries. To keep these production capacities busy, what they are doing is that one way or the other, they are dumping the produce from these production capacities into other countries, and one such country is India, and one such product is steel, right? So what has happened primarily in China, what has happened is that they have created humongous overcapacities. They don't have that kind of demand. Their construction industry is reeling under massive stagnation, right? Massive problems are there. So what do they do with these industries? They cannot let them rot. They cannot sit them idle. They cannot let them, decay. So they are overproducing and they are dumping steel across the length and breadth of the world. And Indian steel industry is facing a very tough time because of this. Because of this dumping that is happening in one way or the other. That's the article that we are discussing, because we need to protect our domestic industry. To protect our domestic industry, we need to stop this dumping one way or the other, right? So this is what the article is all about, that how do we protect our domestic industries? What are the considerations? What are the steps that we need to take to protect our domestic industry? That's what we are discussing over here, right? So we are considering putting on a safeguard duty. We are thinking of imposing a safeguard duty on steel imports, so that we can stop the inflow of cheap steel, right? So experts or industry estimates are suggesting that imported steel is costing 30% less than domestic steel, even after imposition of customs duty. So जो imported steel आ रहा है उसके ऊपर we have placed a customs duty, उसके बाद भी this steel is costing 30% less than domestic steel, right? So the idea over here is that we need to protect our domestic industries. So it's not just China, but also Japan and South Korea. And it is hurting our domestic steel producers. So it will not only hurt the domestic steel producers' ka bottom line, it will not only hurt their balance sheets, it will hurt jobs in our country, it will hurt the export potential from our country in a very big way. So the idea over here is that the Directorate General of Safeguards is involved in this entire exercise, right? It will take 4 to 6 months to do the discussion and impose the duty. the duty, safeguard duty may be in the range of 8 to 12%. Industry is asking for an even higher duty. Industry is saying that US has imposed a fairly heavy safeguard duty to restrict imports from China. We should do exactly the same. We should do exactly what the US is doing. Now this safeguard duty, this is a temporary measure. Please understand that this is a prelims oriented concept, a very good concept, that this safeguard duty is a temporary measure. Maximum 2 years के लिए safeguard duty लगाई जा सकती है, right? And this is not your customs duty, this is something else, right? See what happens is that officials क्या बता रहे हैं कि ये जो safeguard duty है इसको लगाने का process is faster, right? And it will provide the results, in the sense it will provide the protection that the industry is looking for. If we apply customs duty, it will not apply to our free trade agreement partners. Our free trade agreement partners के ऊपर customs duty applicable नहीं करी जा सकती है. And Japan and South Koreas of the world, they are our free trade partners, right? So the idea is that customs duty वहाँ पर increase करना is not going to be helpful, right? But जो safeguard duty है, that safeguard duty will be applicable on all the imports of that product, right? And it will also be compliant with the international trade pacts. यानी कि हमारे international trade pacts, free trade agreements के अंदर there is a provision to apply safeguard duty, which we can use. So rather than trying to increase customs duty, which will not be able to stop the steel coming in from free trade partners, let us apply the safeguards duty. Some numbers are very important and you will be able to appreciate the scale of the problem because of these numbers. जो steel imports है 40% plus का growth हुआ है April to September period के अंदर, 40% का growth हुआ है. We have imported 4.7 metric tons of steel, right? इसके अंदर से अगर आप देखेंगे तो 31% of total imports, right, is coming from China, followed by South Korea, followed by Japan, followed by Vietnam. And Vietnam को जो है यूज करा जाता है by China as a front. So Vietnam से भी जो steel import हो रहा है, most of that steel is coming from China, right? So government departments have understood this problem. India, we used to be a net exporter of steel. We have become a net importer of steel by the end of last financial year. This is where this article becomes really, really important. The fact that a net exporter becomes a net importer, right, is a very, very retrograde development, very negative development for our economy, and this is something that we need to think about, right? So ये जो cheaper imports है, it is creating massive pressure on the bottom line of steel companies, right? We have exported 3.6 million tons of steel in the first 6 months, ठीक है? And हमने safeguards duty पहले भी लगाई है, हमने एंटी डंपिंग ड्यूटी भी लगाई है, हमने टैरिफ रेट कोटा भी लगाया है, राइट? वेरियस प्रकार के स्टेप्स लिए हैं रिटेलिएटरी मेजर्स के तौर पे, राइट? एंड दिस इज व्हाट वी आर अगेन प्लानिंग टू डू. ओके, सो कंपनीज आर वेलकमिंग ऑब्वियसली दिस स्टेप, राइट? सो दिस चीपर इंपोर्ट, दे आर नॉट द बेस्ट क्वालिटी, राइट? इट्स जस्ट चीप, राइट? एंड दैट्स व्हाट द आइडिया ओवर हियर इज. अब हमारी जो इंडियन स्टील कंपनीज है, their expansion plans are under a cloud, under a question mark, ठीक है? And we need to protect our industry. So steel जो है, it's a cyclical industry, and जो current conditions है, they require duty protection, ठीक है? Because this is dumping which is happening and we cannot allow this dumping to happen. And what do I mean by cyclical industry? It goes through ups and downs. It goes through ups and downs. So we need to protect our industry in its downs, and अभी हमारे को हमारी industry को protect करने की ज़रूरत है, right? So this safeguard duty, it will cover all countries and it will check cheap imports from all countries, right? But थोड़ा time लगेगा. So the idea over here is that one another way of doing things is that we can raise the basic custom duty or the most favored nation duty from 7.5% to 15% immediately. तो ये अगर हमने immediately कर लिया, so that will be a very strong signal. And then wait for safeguard investigations to be concluded and be applied. Apart from that, we need our domestic steel industries to become more competitive through investments and modernization. How is it that Chinese steel imports are so cheap? How is it that Chinese are able to produce steel so cheaply? So even if it takes 5-7 years, that's fine. But we need to go on this track of investment and modernization as well. Apart from that, investigation is already happening on the amount of steel dumping. So Directorate General of Trade Remedies, which works under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, they are doing this particular exercise, right? It will be a lengthy exercise. Anti-dumping duty का जो investigation, it takes a long time to conclude, and फिर जब anti-dumping duty लगाई जाती है तो फिर वो 5 साल के लिए लगाई जाती है, right? So we can raise the basic customs duty, right? and subsequently we can think in terms of safeguards duty. ठीक है, so that's the idea. But again, आप बेसिक कस्टम ड्यूटी को इंक्रीज करोगे तो फ्री ट्रेड अग्रीमेंट्स वाले कंट्री से आप स्टील को नहीं रोक पाओगे. So that's why safeguards duty is the way forward. So again, it's a very newsy article. It's a very technical and a very transactional article, right? It's not giving you fantastically new ideas, but it is telling you the problem that we are facing at present in a very important sector of ours, which is one of the core industries in India, and what steps we need to take to protect this industry. I request you to, do some kind of answer writing practice on this particular question. I have discussed the narrow steps that can be taken to protect the steel industry. We can try to broaden the discussion by trying to include certain steps that can be taken to protect the industry in the long term. That how can we increase the indigenous strength or the underlying strength of our own industry to be able to compete against the onslaught of these imports without these kinds of protective measures. So we can just broaden the discussion a little bit in that direction also, and then I think that you are exam ready, at least in terms of being able to protect the steel industry or being able to suggest measures for the steel industry going ahead. So this is my discussion for 21st October. I will be sharing the note. We'll be meeting tomorrow again. I'll be taking our discussion ahead. It was nice interacting with you guys. See you all. Thank you so much. Bye bye.